Good afternoon. This is Joe Scarice, your mortgage lending specialist and host in the Philly Landlord Association. I'm happy to say that we have provided and have produced and edited over 750 educational podcasts for our audience during the pandemic since December 1st of 2019. And we plan on forging forward with more education, more networking, and creating wonderful opportunities for our listeners and our network and our circle of influence. And today, I've met this colleague of mine that we're interviewing today on the podcast, Mr. Don Daniel, the Pill Method International founder, through another channel, which is another enlightenment to social media analytics, Clubhouse. Yes, it's the newest wave app in the past year that has hit the streets where more people are connecting with others throughout the country from an international level. And Don and I became acquainted on some various forums that we were kind enough to be. We played nice together on the forums, and I followed up and extended an invite for Don to come on to the podcast with Yordell and I. And I want to thank him. Don, good afternoon, and welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Joseph. And listen, thank you very much for the opportunity and the invitation. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you today.
Don, you're much better looking in person than on the picture. You do not Photoshop at all your picture on Clubhouse. I want to let you know. Me, I'm work in progress, so we will digress. So let's get right to the root of things. Let's talk about a little background on yourself, your financial background, and where it led to today with the Pill Method International.
Well, with myself, it wasn't until recently I was diagnosed with Asperger's and ADHD. But my financial background is that I got C's and D's in math in school, and school was always difficult for me. And so what led to what I do is my ability to see amortization schedules and see patterns in there that did not make sense to me. And then by looking at them a different way and by figuring this thing out, I said, you know what? I think we could pay less interest if we did this thing instead of that thing. I was a firefighter for 17 years. I don't have a financial degree. I just know when I take a look at a amortization schedule, it is possible to, by using interest cancellation, using the same budget, and cut your interest cost by 50 to 75% just by using math. It's not magic. It's
Well,
just math.
what that sounds to me is common sense. Oh, so I guess you just use common sense. So I mean, they used to use that in the I heard in the 70s and the 80s and hundreds of years prior to that. So you're just using common sense and evaluating a better way to eliminate that. Is
Right.
what we're saying. And you've put a software behind it. Excuse me. Support that. So I love the title of a better way to eliminate debt because as we could both agree, there's good debt and bad debt.
Well,
And we're going to
yeah.
dive a little bit into some questions that we've put together that I think will hopefully get people comfortable, and hopefully you'll get some consultation and some marketing and branding through the podcast itself.
Certainly.
So what does the acronym PIL stand for, and why is it so important?
The acronym, it stands for prepayment of principal, isolating the principal amount, leverage, and liquidity. And here's why it's important. When we talk about prepayment of principal, everyone who has the amortized loan is probably the most ubiquitous financial tool on the planet, and most people have no idea how it works. We've been using this thing for the last 87 years, and so by prepaying principal, we know that we save money, we save interest, and we save time. But if I gave 100 accountants $500 and say, apply that to principal, now tell me how much interest you saved. Not one of them would be able to tell me. So by understanding prepayment of principal, you want to know exactly what you're getting for your money. If I put this here, how much am I actually saving? So that I might find out that, oh, what if I had put a different amount on a different day would have gotten a better result. You can't optimize what you can't measure. So the I stands for isolating the principal amount. How much should we pay or prepay or not prepay? Because there's a point at which more is too much in anything. More people, it's hard for people to understand that by paying a lot of money towards your principal, it's going to save you a lot of interest. But after a certain point, putting more money on only saves you very small increments of interest. So you want to put the right amount on the right day in the right month, and on the right loan so that you can maximize your interest savings with small amounts of cash. So what is the least amount of cash that I can use, or the least amount of effort I can put into something that's going to give me the greatest return? That's isolation of principal amounts. Leverage is basically small amounts of cash eliminating large amounts of interest. So everybody on the planet focuses on, when they're paying off a loan, how do I bring down the principal faster? Where we should be looking at, how much interest can we save? So by looking at leverage, I want to know what's that small amount of money that can get rid of large amounts of cash. And liquidity, understanding the fungibility of money. All money is fungible. It all spends. $1 in your pocket, $1 in your bank account, $1 on your credit card, $1 in your line of credit. It all spends, but they don't all have the same cost. So we look at money differently if it comes in different forms. And some people have an aversion to using a credit card over cash, when that cash could save them several $1,000s in interest by applying it correctly. And if I use a credit card for a purchase or an emergency, and if I track it, that's going to cost me a lot less interest than using my cash to pay down the debt. So that's where the pill method comes from, and understanding these concepts helps us to save a lot of money.
So I read in your book that you have Asperger's. I mean, you brought that to light in the initial part of the interview. How does that come into play here?
Well, the Asperger's helps me to understand that when I was trying to pay off my own debt and it was moving very slowly, and I said, what's going on here? And by looking at the amortization schedule, one of the things I figured out was in terms of my wife's car payment. That was years ago. It was about $400 a month. And by looking at the amortization schedule, I'm saying they're charging me daily interest for 30 days, coming up with how much interest I'm supposed to pay, and then using their math magic to figure out how much principal I pay. So when I make my payment, a certain amount went to interest, a certain amount goes to principal. But that's 30 days of interest mounting up. So if I divide it, as I said, well, why don't I just divide my car payment into fours, bring down, and I asked my credit union, would you accept 1/4 of my payment every week? And they said yes. So I set it up with the credit union so I wouldn't have to worry about it, to send them a payment every week instead of once a month. I'm bringing down the principal balance throughout the month, so there's no way they can charge me the same amount of interest. I'm paying off the car early with the same payment. I'm not adding anything to it. I'm just paying once a week, paying less interest. So more of my current payment goes to principal. That is if I'm going to try to identify what interest cancellation really is using the same amount of money. And how can I pay less interest using the same amount of money? And that's just one of the ways that told me that this is something I need to pay attention to.
So that leads to my next question, which is a famous quote from Franklin Delano Roosevelt. What is the history of mortgage amortization?
Okay, so
I'm aging us.
Yeah, I'm telling you, and I'm still doing the study, But in 1929, it was the big stock market crash. And then after we're trying to pull ourselves out of this thing, in 1934, the government goes to banking and says, listen, we need to jumpstart this economy. We need you guys to start lending again. And that was actually the same year that the agency for housing, yeah, trying to think of it now, the
Department of Housing,
yeah,
Urban Development.
no, not urban development, FH.
Oh, Federal Housing Authority.
Yeah, Federal Housing Authority. Yeah, FHA. That was the same year, 1934. Okay, and so the government goes to banking and says, "Can we do this?" And it says, "I don't think so." So this is when amortization came in. You could not get a 30-year loan prior to 1934. They didn't exist. So most of the loans were 3 to 5 year loans, and most of them were interest only. So now we're going to introduce 30-year amortization where we can make a lot of interest. And they said, I don't know. And that was the same year we started the forerunner to PMI, private mortgage insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, I mean, that got the bank's attention. We like that. We like that idea. And then it says, well, what else you got? Well, we've got 30-year amortization now. We've got the forerunner to PMI. And if your client, if the person is borrowing the money, if they can't pay, now you can also take possession of the property. And the bank said, we are in. And the whole FDR wanted to take people out of renting and get them into house buying. I said house buying instead of home owning, because you don't own it until it's paid for, but at least it's yours to buy. And so now it's a way to create wealth by turning people from renters into home buyers. It helped the economy. And in the 60s, that's when things really started to shift from renting into home buying. And it actually began to fuel the economy and to create a more robust middle class. It was a major contributor.
So I understand the importance of how to understand this. Aren't you just paying more towards principal using money that you should use to invest?
Ah, okay. So in terms of investing, we always want our money to be working. Now, here's what most people believe. And in fact, I had this conversation with a gentleman here in Huntsville, and he's a high net worth individual. He had heard about what I do. And then he wanted to bring his financial planner along. I said, fine, I'll bring them along. And so one of the questions that the financial planner asked me, he says, now my client has a 3% loan. Why would they pay off a 3% loan when I'm making them 6 or 7% in the market? And I said, he wouldn't, but it's not a 3% loan. All 3% loans want you over 30 years, want you to pay back 51.777% of what you borrowed. So it's actually, if it's a $200,000 loan at 3% over 30 years, the bank wants you to pay back $103,000 in interest. Well, that's 51%. So what we want to do is this. We don't want to touch a dime of the money that's going towards investment. But most everybody keeps a little cash on the side for a reserve. And even if they're a residential client or if they are an investor. So what could we do with that cash that we're keeping in reserve? If we knew that $200 of that cash could save me $800 in interest, that would matter. And so that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about taking money from your investment. Let that money work and let it do what it does. But we've got some cash over here on the side that's just sitting So let's find out how much interest we can actually save with that cash that's sitting on the side. And you'll be surprised at what that will do for you. You don't need more money to get out of debt. You just need to pay less interest. And if you are an investor, you're not worried about getting out of debt. Well, how about using that cash to grow your equity at 5 times the regular rate with a much lower interest cost? And now you can cash out refi years earlier than you had planned. That's the purpose of this. That's the meaning of it. And that's why it is important.
So why do I need a computer to tell me to pay more towards principal?
Okay, because it's a complicated system. It's not just paying more willy-nilly. You want to pay the right amount to the right loan. I had a guy call me not too long ago from Arizona, and when he called, he says, "Now I make pretty good money, because we sell solar panels out here, and so I've got all this money, and I've got this debt. So I was using the debt snowball. I took $40,000 out of the bank and paid off my car. And now the $700 I'm no longer paying on the car, I'm going to place that on the principal of my mortgage every month and help pay that down." I said, "Well, that's what the experts are teaching. Why are you calling me?" He says, "Well, because I saw one of your videos online. I'm wondering if I'm doing it the wrong way." So I asked him, "How much interest did you save when you paid off your car?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "Let's figure it out." Well, when we figured it out, he saved $7,700. He no longer has to pay the bank because he paid off his car early. But if he had placed that money on his mortgage, on his Arizona mortgage, it would have saved him $90,000 in interest and cut off 8 years. He became a client that day because what he did was he committed what was called an opportunity cost error. That $40,000 he can only spend one time. He bought $7,000 worth of interest savings when he could have bought 90. If I don't know what my interest costs are, I make mistakes all the time. So now, how do we optimize that? How do we get the biggest bang for our buck? You realize that we can actually figure out how much interest we're saving per dollar. And if we do it at the right time with the right amount of money, on the right day, attacking the right loan, we can increase the amount of interest we're saving per dollar applied to principal. Mm-hmm. So computers don't move dollars. Computers move pennies. Yep. They move 1 penny every day on every loan until it comes up with the right amount of pennies on the right day and the right loan to maximize the amount of interest you could save per dollar. Now, I don't want to sit around all day and try to figure that out. It would take hundreds of years to do that. That's why you need a computer to crunch all that data to come up with that right move on the right day. If you do anything else, you're losing money.
Well, let's turn it around from a real estate investor perspective.
Sure.
If my tenants are paying for an all-time low, on rates right now, yeah. I'm an investor. I get all-time lows on my investment properties. Okay. 1, why should I consider an interest cancellation? And 2, if tenants are paying for my property, why should I care about saving interest?
Okay. Well, number one, let's figure out what's really going on. All right. So there in any business, we have there are expenses. All right. And if we want to figure out what our expenses are, we've got to track those things and subtract them from any potential profit so that we can actually figure out what is our true profit here. So if I'm looking at all my other expenses, but I'm not looking at the cost of borrowing money, everybody looks at the interest rate when they should be looking at interest cost. Mm-hmm. And I've heard so many times about that a 3% rate is almost free money. Well, it's not.
No, if you look at it at a 30-year amortization, it certainly isn't.
Yes. So a 3% loan, you're going to pay back 51% of what you borrowed. At 4%, you're going to pay back 71% of what you borrowed. At 5%, it becomes 93%. And at 6%, it's 115.838%. Interest cost should be considered in everything that we do, even if the tenants are paying for the property. And then if we could figure out a small portion of that money that we are collecting from rents, and use that small portions of that money to kill interest on these loans. So if I can get a 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1 return, if I can put $1 on principal and save $3 in interest, my tenants can help me not only pay for the property, but to accelerate my equity in the property by paying a lot less interest. So that's why that's important. And I get very excited about the fact that we can actually do that with small amounts of money once we understand how to read, understand, and take advantage of an amortization schedule.
So how can I use the pill method with a buy and hold strategy? As you know, I'm the founder of the Creative BRRRR Strategy Club on Clubhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously people come up with their own creative ways of conquering BRRRR. Some come up with a little more crazier than others, but
Mm-hmm.
I like this because when I talk to my clients, because most of my clients are accredited investors, meaning they own $1 million worth of properties plus their primary residence, they make a certain income level. And I say, treat the loan differently. And they're like, what do you mean treat the loan? That's why I took a 30-year out.
Yeah.
So give some of my professional real estate investors and credit investors that are listening into the podcast this morning or this afternoon,
Mm-hmm.
how can we use the pill method with a buy and hold BRRRR strategy? Meaning buy, renovate, rent, refinance, redo.
Okay. So one of the things that we need to consider, since I don't use the BRRRR strategy myself,
Mm-hmm.
but in terms of the little piece of this that staying in my lane, which is I'm borrowing the money. How can I rent my money for less? Interest payments, nothing more than rent on money. So if I can rent my money at a discount, why wouldn't I? So I've got a person here who in Huntsville, Alabama, who is a very successful business person who ran across my book, gave me a call and said, how can I use this? So we figured out on one of his properties, and he's got $2 million worth of properties, one of his properties in 37 months, with the tenants paying the rent, he's paid it down at 5%. He's paid it down by $99,000, $99,795. But in 37 months, it cost him $222,000 in interest. When I pointed that out to him, he says, I never really tracked that before or added it up because the tenants were paying the bill. I never did a cumulative study on how much interest I was paying over time. So now we can, with our system, he is now going to pay off $2 million worth of property, and he's only going to pay from this day forward, he's going to pay $231,000 in interest, and instead of paying it off over 21 years. If he chose to, he could pay it off in 5 with just a small amount of the rent pushed over to the side and say, we're going to use this to cancel interest. Now, if his goal is not to pay off the property, do you see how we increase equity at a much faster rate?
Absolutely.
And if I understand BRRRR strategy, we want to get to a point where we can cash out refi and then acquire more properties.
And leverage again with the proper debt service coverage ratio.
Exactly.
So, biggest question.
Yes.
Big. Where do we get your book?
On Amazon.
Okay. Well, give our audience some detail. How do we find it? Because let's dummy it down. Because hey, listen, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. how do I find Don Daniel, the Pill Method International book?
Okay. Well, first of all, if you Google pill method, we've been out there, we've been doing this for over 15 years. So if you Google pill method, birth control is on page 2. Okay, that's number 1. So if you want to find the pill method, now you mentioned that you like the idea that the title, a better way to eliminate debt. I didn't come up with that. My clients come up with that. Every person that calls to a person says the same thing. I was looking for a different way. I was looking for a better way to handle, to manage my debt. That's where we got that. But if you just Google pill method book, it'll take you to Amazon, and that's where you can find it. And it's just $20. It's $19.99, I think. And it's going to be the best $20 you spend. And it's going to give you some idea, a brand new idea. Now, here's what you're not going to get. You're not going to get in that book warmed over information. You're not going to get the debt snowball. You're not going to get the avalanche methods, which have worked for years. But with those methods, they do not take into account interest cost. This is the only place where you're going to find out how interest cancellation actually works and how it can work for you. So that's how you can get the book.
And what is the best way to reach out to you for a consultation and or discussion in regards to savings on mortgage, interest rates, amortization? What's the best way to set that up with you?
The best way to set that up is to go to pillmethod.com. That's pillmethod.com. And in the middle of the page, there's a button there that says, get a free savings and earnings report. Put in your financial data. Someone from my staff will give you a call. We will confirm that financial data and put together a free savings report for you. And then we'll set up a meeting so that we can go over that information and give you a free class on interest cancellation and how all of this can work for you. You'll find out the month and year you could be debt-free and the amount of interest that you could save. If you're an investor, we can do a side-by-side amortization and then show you, and then you can determine from that side-by-side amortization, oh, when can I cash out refi, and I don't have to depend on market conditions to be able to accelerate my equity, growing my equity, so that I can cash out refi. So we'll be able to do that for you as well.
Excellent. Don, I want to thank you for taking the time on a Monday. I know we have busy days between Clubhouse and actually working at times. So I want to appreciate it. It's really nice to meet you in person. We did talk on the phone. We did talk on Clubhouse, but it's always authentic when you get to meet people in person on a face-to-face. I hope to meet you in person live, hopefully in the future. I do plan on coming out to Atlanta for the Clubhouse Live event, so maybe we could run into each other there in August.
Well, I already have my ticket.
Yeah.
And in fact, I have family members in Atlanta, and I live in Huntsville, Alabama, which is 3.5 hours away.
It's not a bad ride. So yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. I do plan on coming down to Atlanta for that convention. So I'm excited about that. I'm really glad that we were able to create this relationship through a whole nother app and brought it to the podcast. I brought my co-founder onto Clubhouse now. He's slightly addicted, and I'm very careful, as you are. We want to make sure we're bringing authentic and integrous information. And I think you provided some really good foundation for people to feel comfortable to come back to you and ask you very specific questions to what their financial resume looks like and what their immediate plan and future plans are. So I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank everybody listening in. I want to thank our social media strategist, Yardell Perkins, who will provide you a cut and edited version of this so you can post it up to your YouTube and send it out to your network. And let's stay connected, Don, and I will see you on Clubhouse in the immediate future. Have a wonderful week, and we'll talk again. I want to thank everybody again. Be well, and thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Joseph.
Take care, Don. Thank you again.